Welcome to the Rock Guitar Confidential podcast with Ryan and Scott. Today's episode, Why Can't Rock Be Fun? Let's find out together.
So welcome back to Rock Guitar Confidential with Scott and Ryan. I'm Ryan.
I'm Scott. Nice to have you guys here to listen to us ramble on about all kinds of things rock guitar. And today's topic is going to be...
How about we start with... I kind of want... Well, how about why can't rock be fun? And then, subtopic, the Slayer debate.
Okay. So why can't rock be fun anymore? And this really, I think, kind of stems from the fact that at one point in history, rock and roll was meant to be like a celebratory kind of music. Really, from its inception, it was all about partying, like going out and dancing and having fun with friends. That was like the whole thing, being wild, being out of control, doing stuff your parents didn't think you should be doing. That's kind of the impetus of what rock and roll was. It started as celebratory.
I think Henry Rollins described it as, I want to break shit and fuck on the floor.
Yes. Well, Henry Rollins is probably not entirely wrong on that whole thing. But rock and roll was kind of expected to be fun for most of its existence. Really, the heyday of rock and roll, I think most people would agree, was probably the 70s and 80s. That's like the heyday of rock and roll.
Oh, absolutely. But even back into its inception, Chuck Berry wasn't bummed.
Nope. No, Jerry Lee Lewis wasn't bummed when he was banging his 14-year-old wife, too. Yeah. Whatever those guys were doing back in the day.
Right.
But
dude, Elvis wasn't bummed until later.
That's true.
And then at least he had a peanut butter banana sandwich.
Yeah,
so.
And he had the good decency to die on the toilet, too. So
absolutely.
It all ended well.
Right. Absolutely.
But I think especially the 70s and 80s, 70s, I think it was weird. There was this thing like the punk movement came out and was kind of making it seem like it wasn't okay to have fun. It was like, you're supposed to be real and, dark and angry. That was like the whole thing. And then bands
if it's, I appreciate the do-it-yourself ethic of those original punk bands. And, I will argue that punk hasn't existed since 1981 or 1982.
I think that's probably true. And then there's like a weird pop Orange County version, like Blink-182, Green Day kind of version.
Green Day's not punk.
Of course they're not, but that's like what people think of as punk.
What is Billy Joe Armstrong's accent? What do you call that?
Does he have an accent?
Well, he's got punk voice accent.
I think it's Orange County bro accent.
He's got this is what I think a punk singer, this is what I think their accent should be. He can't go full on faux British accent, but there's an affectation that Billy Joe uses that
I don't think I've ever heard him talk, so I don't even know. I've heard American Idiot and stuff, but I don't know. I think
which I wholeheartedly support the message of that song.
No, I agree. I don't give a crap about Green Day or Blink-182 or that's not. But that being said, that's like what people think punk is. But even that was more celebratory. Look at
totally,
Stacy's mom or whatever. It's like there's like a bunch
that's
of
pop punk.
That's
not even really punk.
That's what Blink-182 and Green Day. That's what punk is for people who grew up in the 90s. That's what punk is.
If you like a song like Sonic Reducer by the Dead Boys, that rocks. Mm-hmm. It's heavy, it rocks. There's a little bit of, I don't know if I want to say glam, but there's definitely a fashion consciousness.
Yeah.
With that era, right? And there was much more diversity with all that too.
I think that was the first time that the idea that rock and roll shouldn't be fun, it kind of started coming out. I think that it was we should be serious and things are bad and that we need to really talk about this. And
I think that really. I'm going to put the blame there on the 90s. You can't listen to the Ramones sing "Sheena is a punk" and not think they're just having fun.
Yeah, that's true. But if you look at the whole rock media approach to looking at punk, they kind of saw it as more real, more authentic than the band Van Halen or Led Zeppelin. They thought it was they call it bloated dinosaur rock at the time. And and I look at that and I just think, okay, those guys were having fun. In Aerosmith came out in the late 70s, and then when you have bands like ZZ Top, who were more looking for some tush, just basically just having fun. That's what rock and roll. Look at and then you look at bands like Foreigner who got completely just raked over the coals because Hot Blooded. That's
dude, I Want to Know What Love Is one of the best sounding songs ever recorded.
Foreigner's awesome.
When that plays, when I'm in a lesson and I hear that play over the store or sound system, I always pause and I point it out to whoever's in my teaching studio.
Waiting for a Girl Like You is like that too. That's
So
another
good.
one that really, really good. But I mean, I look at those kind of bands that were ostensibly fun. Like 38 Special was kind of like that. And then in the 80s, you had bands like Loverboy, and then obviously all the hair bands like the Bon Jovis and the Poisons. It was all like I want nothing but a good time.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I would challenge any young guitar player to watch that music video and then tell me how you don't want to do that for the rest of your life.
Yeah, exactly. But that's what I mean. So that was like the whole ethos of it. And I think once the thrash thing started coming out in the late 80s, it was kind of, I get the impression that those guys just weren't quite as good at guitar players as the guys in the hair bands necessarily.
What, the thrash guys?
Yeah, I mean, come on.
Alex Skolnick?
Skolnick came much later, though. Skolnick was like the next generation.
Well,
if you look at guys like Gary Holt, look at Gary Holt, look at Kerry King, look at Jeff Hanneman, look at Kirk Hammett.
Exodus was doing yeah.
They're not George Lynch or Warren DeMartini.
No, not at all.
I mean,
they're nowhere near as melodic.
They're nowhere near as technically capable either as those guys.
Not at all. And that wasn't the.
And I think that the virtuosity that those guys in those bands, that the guys like the guys in Dokken and Rat and Van Halen and Whitesnake, all those guys had. I think in a way they felt like, and it's not that those guys were bad players like Gary Holtz or any of those guys in Kirk Hammett, and those guys weren't bad players, but they weren't quite at that level either. And I think that they kind of were a little angry about that. The second thing I think is more of a personal thing, is a lot of those guys played the same clubs as those other bands, and they play clubs to like 20 sweaty dudes, where Rat would play to be 300 hot girls throwing their panties at them.
I remember quitting the band I was playing in my early 20s because I was tired of playing for dudes.
Yeah. But I think
I think
that had something to do with it, though, and I think that led to sort of this idea that those bands are all bullshit. They're just all image. It's not about the music. We're about the music. They're not. It's all.
We're authentic.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that sort of led to the idea that the more dark and the more dirgy you make it, the more unlistenable you make it, the more authentic you are.
You know the band that perfectly combined all of that was Skid Row.
I was actually going to go Armored Saint.
I'll take Armored Saint.
That's another band that was kind of, to me, like really straddled those lines between like the thrash and like the more mainstream metal.
I'm not a privileged kid. I'm a dirty street kid from the city, but I've also got chops.
Yeah. And the guys at Skid Row were that way too, for sure.
Yeah, totally.
And could write songs, man.
Oh, God.
Everybody thinks that Youth Gone Wild and 18 Life's the only thing that band ever did.
Which are great, but the first three albums from Skid Row are awesome.
I agree.
The first three, I'm going to throw Subhuman Race in
I'm not
there
as familiar with Subhuman Race, but I love the first two. Slave to the Grind and the first one are great. I thought everything about them is great. The production, Michael Wagner's production is incredible on those, and I think the guitar playing is great. I look at the song like Quicksand Jesus. That is some high level songwriting.
In a darkened room.
That's some high level songwriting that those guys were doing. You know what I mean?
That's, absolutely. Dude, I remember exactly where I was when the video for Monkey Business premiered on MTV, man. I was at my buddy's house down the street and remember you couldn't get on the internet back then, so I just had to try and remember how fucking awesome it was after I saw it, because my family didn't have cable at the time. So,
I mean, MTV was hard to come by. If you had a friend who had MTV, like go to their house and hang out. It's like, oh my God, you have Headbangers Ball? What's it going to be on? I'll be there. We'll go swimming and watch Headbangers Ball.
Dude,
I remember watching, I had a friend when I was in my freshman year in high school, whose family had a pool and MTV. So I would go there like every day in the summer, and we'd go swim, and then we'd jump in and we'd watch Headbangers Ball, and they'd be like,
nice.
I remember watching like Unskinny Bop and the videos, like, they would play all that stuff, and it was really fun because it was something we didn't have at home. So I mean,
dude, when Flesh and Blood came out like the week before I left to go to summer camp in 6th grade.
Oh wow.
So the whole time I was at summer camp, I had my Sony Walkman, and I just listened to that cassette until I wore it out.
Yeah.
Like the whole, it was a great summer, man.
I remember thinking like when that album came out that the production was really dry. I didn't have words for it when I was that age, but I'm thinking it was very dry. I remember I didn't like the guitar tones very much on that album. I felt like it was a step down from the album before. I thought that was production was way better on the one before it. I thought the songs were better too, or more focused. I feel like that album, they started getting a little more unfocused with their songs. It wasn't kind of direct.
Well, here's where that contrasts with what Skid Row was doing. Skid Row, I mean, I know that for Poison that was their third album, but a lot of people came to Poison on Open Up and Say Ah.
Yeah, and if not the first one, because they had like I Won't Forget You. They had Talk Dirty to Me.
Look what the Cat Dragged In is. Yeah, I Want Action. What a great song.
It's a classic kind of. Almost a snapshot of that time period. You know what I mean? Like, this is the year 1987 in Hollywood. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's to me, like, that album is that. And then Open Up and Say Ah is like, okay, now we're ready to be arena headliners. We have the goods now, And
by the way, I had a very good friend of mine who works in the industry. Dude, he told me, who's killing it in arenas right now? Poison.
I can see that. I mean, there's nothing else like that. You know what I mean?
They're slaying right now
because they're still relatively young enough that they can put on a good show.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at like Motley Crue, I mean, Vince, how many shows is he gonna have in him to be able to get through that? You know, and Mick Mars can barely stand. It's like those guys.
I hate to say it, but you know, Coverdale, Don Dokken, like those guys, it's time.
Yeah, I think so. Especially considering that Coverdale's got standards. You know, he wants to really go out, not being like a shell of himself. And Don Dokken, I think, is just content to show up and mumble the lyrics.
Yeah,
and then
that's hard for me to watch.
And him and Lynch come out and play. They hate each other, and it's what's so funny watching that. If you see like the YouTube clips of those guys playing, is like Don is totally phoning it in. George is totally phoning it in. So you can tell there's no passion at all.
Yeah.
You know, to do what they're doing. They realize that I feel like they feel like they're trapped. Like we made this thing. It's like we made these things that everyone loves, and they'll keep paying to come see it.
What else am I going to do?
Exactly. Yeah. Like, I can't go out and play my 15th solo record I just put out. No one cares. If they want to hear,
dude, I would love
when the night comes down, and it's like
I would love for Don Dokken to put together. Who was it? John Norum and the other guy's name was like something like Chris White or. On that Dokken, the one that made
the solo album,
drums, the solo album, man.
I thought that was a great album, actually.
It's such a great album.
It's amazing though how much his voice has fallen off to the point where it's like he's not even I wouldn't even say shell of his former self. I mean David Coverdale can still sing the in the mid range and he can still kind of get those screams if he really puts his heart into it. But he can't sing high. Like the band, if you're watching any live clips of Whitesnake, the band does all the vocal lifting.
There's
for him.
definitely a drop off in power, and you know it's okay.
He's 70. He's 70. And he also is dude is like jumping from the risers, you know, when he was younger, and it's and
it takes a toll.
It does, but I think the idea of holding into that is, but he's also one of the last real authentic rock stars. You know, the guy who's like a rock god standing up there doing it, and I don't know. I think that whole time period, which you and I were both kids when that was happening, you know, like the '80s kind of heyday. But it was all fun. Like everything was fun. Like when a band would come out with something really dark. I remember I saw like Prong Prove You Wrong on MTV one time.
Oh, that's cool.
And I was like going, what is this? This is way left field. It's like super like dark and thrashy, and there's no melody. It's like
I actually like that song.
I don't hate that song, no, but I remember it really struck me because it was so different. Because I think the video before was like, you know, Hysteria by Def Leppard, and all of a sudden you got Prong, and it's like this is left turn for sure. And I think you know, that time period for the most part, with a few exceptions, was all big hooks, big choruses. You know, Lay Your Hands on Me. You know, Bad Medicine.
Sure.
You know, Fool for Your Lovin'. You know, all those great songs. You know, it's obviously.
Well, and still, you know what, Prong can coexist. You know, I'm still going to defend Slayer later in this podcast, but I mean, all of that. I mean, I'll take any of that as the standard in popular rock music over what happened. I almost don't want to.
That's what I'm trying to get to. It was like that time period. It was all fun. And
I almost don't want to speak the name, but it rhymes with Novocaine.
Yeah, it's no good. Yeah. So after the grunge apocalypse, it became
the grunge apocalypse.
Yeah, it became basically like, okay, everything's got to be like super, you know, fake real. It's got to be like dark. I'm sad and twisted. No one understands me. You know, I'm so genius, but nobody understands what I'm saying because I'm so unique and special. It's like it's so gross. And like rock and roll became about like dirgy, like inwardness, not so much outwardness.
Mm-hmm. And there's a great interview with Buzz from the Melvins about well, you got to give him credit. You know, like he discusses the time that they had to work with Cobain, and he fired him because he was just too strung out and like impossible to work with.
By the way, the Melvins are one of the worst live bands I've ever seen in my life.
I'm sure they are terrible.
Dude, I saw them open for Rush on the Counterparts tour.
What?
Yes, and you've never seen an arena like screaming profanities and running for the exits faster. It was the ugliest thing I've ever seen. I remember thinking, who the hell booked these guys to open for Rush? Like, why are the Melvins opening for Rush? It doesn't make any sense.
Dude, you know, I was at a Metallica concert in 1994 where the opener was Suicidal Tendencies.
That actually sounds like a cool mix. You know,
it was my first big concert, and I remember coming through the gates. Like before, like, you know, emerging out to see the entirety of the crowd with the band on stage, I could feel the kick drum in my chest as I walked through the corridor with, you know, hundreds of other people to get in there. And it was Suicidal Tendencies, and whoever their lead guitar player at the time, it was like right during solo time, and he was getting it, man. It was good. God, it was fucking awesome. So that was my first big concert experience. The next band up was Candlebox.
This was like 95 or something like that.
It was 94.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It was the Binge and Purge tour in 94.
Oh.
And, dude, so the crowd...
No, I like Candlebox, I'll be honest with you.
Really?
They don't belong on that bill, though. That doesn't make any sense.
There's definitely needs to be like a Scott and Ryan debate podcast.
Where do we not agree?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't love Candlebox, but what I've heard from Candlebox, I didn't despise. I thought, okay, that was fine. You know,
like I don't need a box for my candles. I buy one, I light it, I use it, and then it stays there. The box is just unnecessary.
I remember it struck me though that they played solos in the '90s, so I'll give them credit for that. You know what I mean?
I don't know, man. I could leave Candlebox far behind. Now and the crowd.
I'm not going to stand here and defend the I don't hate Candlebox, but I have no particular love for Candlebox either.
I just some other band could have used that record contract.
Totally. You know who they should have brought? Should have brought another like emerging thrash band like Testament or something like that, or a band who's starting to struggle in the '90s, like bring Testament, bring Exodus, bring Death Angel, bring one of those bands out or something like that.
Dude, one of my closest friends in the world, his band got dropped from their label. I mean, they were more of like a synth pop Depeche Mode kind of thing, which, full disclosure, I also have a deep and abiding love for synth pop. I love Pet Shop Boys.
Yeah.
There's no guitars, but that's not what this podcast is about. Anyway,
this is like it's okay, man. This is a safe space.
Yeah, it's a safe. Okay, cool.
You can do what you got to do. If you love that. I don't know what would be my equivalent. I've always really been a huge fan of Tori Amos and Sarah McLachlan.
Yeah,
I'll put that out there.
Although PJ Harvey is the greatest female artist of that era.
I only just discovered that era like maybe 20 years ago. I mean, it was like 2002 when I discovered who like Dave Matthews and Sarah McLachlan and Tori Amos. I remember discovering Collective Soul in like 2002, and then people were like, this band was like from '94. I'm like, they were?
Yeah, a friend of mine just went to like last year went to go see. He went to some festival where Dave Matthews, and I've seen Dave Matthews Band live. His band is awesome.
Yeah.
But I asked my student if he gets like a VIP package, if he sees Dave Matthews, could he please punch him in the throat so he can never sing ever again or try to sing.
I can't believe you're going there with Dave Matthews.
Hey, he can still play guitar in his band. They could just hire someone who's good at singing.
He's unique, though.
To do the singing.
He's got his thing. I mean, that's
his thing. He is
Ryan,
on the
you got to realize I spent literally like 2.5 years of my life playing in a band that was almost half Dave Matthews covers.
Dude, I'm glad you survived.
But I actually grew to like that stuff. I really did.
Oh man.
It's weird. I had a weird situation with that. Speaking of rock being fun, I was playing obviously metal with my solo band for years, and then I kind of hit this wall, and I started playing this pop stuff, and it sort of took me on this ride for like 2-3 years of playing pop music. I played a cover band a little bit, and then we did an original band. It was kind of Matchbox 20-ish kind of thing during that time period. I remember I had the white frosted hair and all that stuff, and it was like
I had frosted hair.
Yeah, we all did. It's like that was like 2001.
Yeah, experiments with bleach,
something like that. But I remember that was it was interesting and different, and then I've kind of realized like around 2003, 2004, I'm like, oh, that's right, I should be playing metal. That's what I should be doing. This is a fun aside. It's like
life is too short to be bummed.
And what they call it, it's an interlude. I'm going back to what I should be doing. Yeah. You know what I mean?
I remember feeling like lost in the wilderness during that time. In fact, I ended up like the first serious band out of high school that I played in was kind of like a synth pop type thing. Because that was the kind of pop music
there was no direction at that time. It wasn't like there was a scene to be a part of. It wasn't like, oh, there's a bunch of bands that are doing great with this and it's really cool. There was nothing like that. And I lived in Los Angeles at the end of the 90s too, and there was nothing happening in LA. That's the reason I moved back to Sacramento. I was like, there's no reason to stay down there. Unless you wanted to join like 15 bands and showcase just as a second person for some female vocalist or something, or if you want to start a pop punk band, that was like your options down there at that time. And or get a pair of Adidas and put your hat on backwards and play a 7-string with rapping over it. That was like basically what you could do.
You know what? I would before I lose the thought, I'll just finish the story about Candlebox.
Oh, sure, yeah.
The crowd threw so much trash on the stage, they had to cut their set short. They maybe only played like 3 or 4 songs, and that was it.
I got to tell you, as a performer, I feel for those guys. That's got to be a really rough thing. I'm direct support for Metallica, and I'm getting booed off the stage.
Yeah, I mean that would suck, but I mean they were Candlebox.
So you're suggesting is they had it coming?
Yeah, I mean they were opening for Metallica, but they had another thing coming.
Yeah, it's true. But the Priest would have been the headliner of that show.
Yes, they should have been. But so back to our other topic though about that period of time.
Well, that's I think where it really became a dirty word to have fun in rock. you know, and it was one of those things. I think one of the only band. This is gonna sound really weird on the left field. The only band in that time period I remember that was just about having fun, not even a rock band, was Bare Naked Ladies. That's a band that didn't take themselves seriously at all, and that was like the only one that was like a breath of, oh, this can all just be fun.
Yeah, they're like the next generation of They Might Be Giants.
Yeah, but that band, that's not a great band, but that band was a band who patently didn't take itself seriously.
Oh, totally.
You know, and I think that was such a refreshing thing, as all these bands are all just like,
hey, look at the success of Steel Panther these days.
Steel Panther's awesome.
Well, because Russ Parrish,
otherwise
known as Satchel.
Ralph Science too. That guy is a great singer. That's
such a great. All those guys are solid. Man.
I mean, that whole band is killer. I mean, they write great stuff too. I think that's the thing. It's not just their music's a joke. Their music is like all about fun and just being ridiculous.
And you know what? Like, maybe that's part of the thing. If you get past some of the silly lyrical content,
Bukkake Tears.
Yeah. You know, if you can get.
Have you heard "Going in the Back Door"?
Yes. Oh yeah, all of it. Yeah, all of it. And you know, dude, like, Russ Parrish is so melodically strong.
He's just a great
guitar player. Yeah,
he played in Fight. He was the guitarist for Fight,
which is a great band.
Yeah, that's
a great band with Scott Travis, super awesome guy.
Yeah, Rob Halford lead vocals, obviously. Yeah. I mean, that was a great band. I mean, but he actually was GIT or just had left GIT when I went there. Like, he had just got the gig in Fight because he was a teacher there.
Yeah, him and Paul. He was like Paul Gilbert's roommate for a while, right?
They're buddies.
Paul was on
and
tour
he'd be walking around there all the time and stuff. Yeah. So it was, you know.
Yeah, I'm told that when Russ was at GIT, everybody just kind of was like, "Dude, why is this guy here? He doesn't need to be here."
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was because the thing to do was to go to GIT. That was like if you want to be a hot shot guitar player, you go to GIT, which is why I went there.
Well, I mean, he's like definitely one of those guys where like he's just like on such a high level. It's like, dude, just go out there and do it.
Yeah, which he did. You know, I mean, honestly, it's so funny though the way that those guys made it was they had to do metal school and find their way through it. But let's get back to the fun part, though.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like that whole idea that it can't be fun is really a product of the punk movement and its echo, which was the grunge movement. To me, like, those guys are kind of related, those movements.
Again, driven by record companies.
Yeah, well, partially that, and driven by people who think it's cool, not good at what you do for some reason. Or it's not, you know, pretending like you're better than us, but you think you're better than us. I'm like, well, you can't play guitar like me. Yeah, I'm better than you at this.
You can have, you can be... Just because something is polished and produced doesn't mean it's not also authentic.
Yeah, it's true. And that brings us to the thing we're going to talk about Slayer and Motley Crue.
And well, one more, if I could add one more thing, I would just invite any of our listeners to watch the movie Rockstar with Mark Wahlberg.
And Jennifer Aniston and Zakk Wylde.
Yeah. And I mean, killer soundtrack.
Actually, Jeff Pilson's in that too.
That's right. Jeff Pilson's the bass player, as always.
Yep.
And then some actors and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what? Watch that movie, right? Like, all the way to the end. And in the end, you know, he's in a coffee shop sitting on a stool. Okay, that's not better.
Yeah, I know. That's going down.
Like, they should have edited the movie to where he's just like, oh, cool, I'm going to stay in this band. Yeah. And then roll the credits.
Or I'm going to start a new band that's my own and let.
And it's also going to be or whatever they're going to do. But, like, you know.
Well, I think that's like a metaphor in the filmmaker's mind for I'm growing up and I'm putting this rock and roll stuff behind me, and now I'm going to get serious and play some serious music.
Fuck that.
Of course, but I think that's the idea of that's what they're trying to get.
No, I agree.
That. You know what? I don't know if
you know what I mean.
I don't know if you've experienced this in your life either, but I've talked to friends of mine who, like, I mean, I was jamming with when we were kids or something, and then if they're still playing, very often I'll hear something to the effect, or even colleagues who I'll know, you know, through True Fire or something like that, and they'll say like, "Oh yeah, I started off playing Sabbath and Van Halen and, you know, Metallica." I'm like, awesome. They go, yeah, but now I'm really into, like, you know, like old school, like Muddy Waters, and I'm playing a lot of, like, you know, like a John Scofield. I'm really a huge John Scofield fan. I'm like, oh, why aren't you listening to fucking Rat, dude? What's wrong with you?
Yeah,
you know,
right.
It's like,
there's nothing wrong with continuing to, you know, those artists also grow.
There's this idea though that, like, when you grow up, you outgrow rock and roll. Like, rock and roll is something it's a phase you grow out of, kind of thing. Yeah. And I remember thinking, like, dude, if that's true, I'm like Benjamin Button here. I'm working backwards because I had my
Ryder Peter Pan. Yeah, totally, man.
I had my jazz moment when I was like 19, 20, when I was in music school.
Jazz is something we all have to.
And then I slowly devolved back away. I went through the pop phase, and then I went through the
devolve.
I went back to what my roots were, my starting point was. You know what I mean?
You mean you're saying you're being authentic.
Yeah, just exactly. Well, it brought me back to why I started playing guitar.
What?
In the first
I've never
place.
seen you wear flannel.
Yes, I'm not that mature. I don't have my flannel on.
Yeah,
I have a shower today.
Yeah.
That shows me that I'm not really authentic at all.
So we totally refute the notion that when you grow up, you can't
you
play
can't rock.
awesome bombast. Yeah, you can't rock. That's ridiculous.
I think Rob Halford every day and Bruce Dickinson show that that's true. That you can't. That's not true at all. You know what I mean?
Without a doubt. Thanks for listening to Rock Guitar Confidential with Scott and Ryan. Please make sure to click that like button, rate 5 stars, and subscribe. Now back to the show.
Look, everyone's got to do what's right for them, obviously. But at the same time, the idea that like I grew up and now I don't listen to rock anymore is like the most offensive bullshit I've ever heard in my life.
We're being very. The fact that, singer-songwriter on a stool in the coffee shop is somehow more respectable than, shredding off some solos and jumping off the stage and like brightly colored guitars and like that specifically is bullshit.
Yeah, that's very much a media-driven kind of idea. It's something like the Rolling Stone magazine people would want to say, like, well, that's not real music. This is real music. I just feel like there's a little bit of, they see it as elitism, like what you think you're better than me. Like when they see like Eddie Van Halen playing or something, like doing a 5-minute unaccompanied solo. Yeah. There's this idea like, well, what you're so elitist, like you're just trying to show.
You know what? I don't even mind drum solos.
If it's done by like Tommy Aldridge or Neil Peart,
then I'm there for it.
Absolutely.
Please. Bass solos I'll pass. But
and nobody needs a bass solo.
No.
I mean, that's the first time people were actually aware the bass players in the band. Like, there's a bass player in this band? I didn't even know.
Unless it's Tony Franklin.
Yeah. That's Tony. Yeah, but Tony Franklin typically plays in trios, so you only know he's there. Geddy Lee.
Smart move.
Yeah, that's true.
And Geddy Lee, yeah, totally.
Yep.
Oh man, yeah, that's great.
I mean, the fun part of it, though, I feel like is so intrinsically woven into what rock and roll is supposed to be. It's about rebellion and fun, and then being your authentic self. And I think the grunge thing is much more in line with, there's something just so, like, despicable and gross about a bunch of middle-class white kids from the suburbs, like, whining and complaining about how bad they have it and how their dad didn't love them enough and they're not, no one understands me. This is like, I don't...
Rate me.
Exactly. Like, who cares, dude? Grow the fuck up. You think George Lynch had it that easy? But he still found a way to kick ass.
Oh, no.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
think Eddie Van Halen, when he's living in a one-bedroom house with his brother and his mom and dad with like $20 to names after coming across the ocean in a fucking ship, had it easy.
Facing racist discrimination
exactly.
from the people around him.
I don't want to hear about, like, you're a suburban kid from Seattle and you have too many problems. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just... that actually, I hate to say that, that's our generation, is the grunge generation.
And I think just so that everybody out there doesn't think that we're just fixated on grunge, we're also talking about what became of popular guitar-based music from that
point on,
from that demarcation point forward.
Yeah, you look at includes like Korn, Limp Bizkit.
Yeah, and then, there's the whole new metal thing. There's a couple documentaries out about Woodstock '99.
Yeah.
Anybody out there, watch that, and then, ask yourselves, is that the world I want to live in?
Well, here's the thing, too. Then when it's not. I think the answer happens by itself. You know that it's not the world we want to live in.
Yeah, I know. I just want to make sure that everybody knew it.
But if you look at the new wave of American heavy metal that came out in the early 2000s, like, the bands like Killswitch Engage and Lamb of God and Trivium and stuff.
Good stuff.
The guitar playing got really big, but it still was that sort of like dirgy sort of death and destruction. It wasn't really fun music. It was like played well.
Yeah,
but it kind of didn't have like a let's party kind of atmosphere to it. And actually, metal really hasn't had that since, outside of maybe the Darkness and Steel Panther.
Oh, like, Darkness is so good.
But that's like the only bands that have that kind of vibe. You know what I mean? And it's all the other metal bands. It's just like they're trying to be like between death and thrash. And there's nothing fun about. I mean, I'm not trashing death metal or thrash metal, but it's not a fun style of music. You know what I mean?
It's fun in a different way. I mean, there's a lot of virtuosity in death metal and in some thrash metal.
And all those bands I just mentioned have great players, and it's just one of those things that I look at that and I think that there's nothing like tuneful or like, hummable or fun that's going to entice. Like, say, imagine you're like a 12-year-old girl who's never listened to metal, and then if someone puts on like some Lamb of God track, like, that's not going to relate at all.
No.
But if I put on, something like Community Property from Steel Panther, that's totally going to relate. You know what I mean? It's like, that's going to, that's awesome. And I think that melodically. Yeah, exactly. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I think like, but that's a song that like, oh, that's catchy. That's really, you know, I think one other thing that's changed why it's so unbalanced now, where it's like all this deathy, dirgy stuff, is because I think when we were kids, it was a real mixed bag, and I feel like you had like an entry point. Like if you want to listen to rock music, you could start with a band like Bon Jovi or Def Leppard or Van Halen. And it was like a nice, easy, hey, man, you like, Duran Duran and in Hall & Oates? Well, come and check us out. This is a song called Jump, or this is, Photograph, or something like that. And it's like, it wasn't a giant leap from that to that. We could listen to it, and someone who wasn't a rock person could get into rock and roll, this kind of ease their way into it. And then they say, oh, that's pretty cool. Well, Whitesnake, this other band's pretty cool. Oh, the Judas Priest and the Maiden, they're pretty cool. And then you sort of work your way up to a band like, say, Megadeth or Slayer. You don't like start there when you're starting fresh. Yeah. There was like a sort of a whole like process you could go through to become a fan of the extreme metal. But right now, because almost all the metal that's being made is extreme, it's not surprising to me that metal has become like this completely like under the ground thing. There's no entry point for someone who's not already a metal fan. It's like this purity test. You have to be so metal to be taken seriously by metal people.
Well, there's always been a trend of, like back before there was streaming and the internet and everything, like in order to find the real dope, you had to go, hey, your buddy's older brother has this cassette tape or this record from, they're called Metallica, you should listen to this. They're not on MTV, they're not on the radio. Yeah. Or, this is the real dope.
Like, I think it's one of the reasons why when they got big on like on the Injustice for All and they put the hit videos out, then people felt so betrayed.
Actually, the betrayal happened on the Black Album.
But I think that's why, though, because before that, it was like your little secret that your friends and you knew about. But once they become like everybody's favorite band, when your dentist is buying the Metallica album, and that makes you feel so betrayed.
Yeah, dude, when the jocks and other kids at the Catholic school who'd been bullying me for years and years, right? Like, by the time we're in 8th grade and they're like, oh, hey, dude, Metallica, they're cool. It's like, no, fuck you.
Yeah, that's my band. You don't do that.
You're the reason I listen to Fade to Black in my bedroom with all the lights turned off and the shades drawn. Like, you're the reason.
You paint quite the picture. You're like Robert Wordsworth. You're just.
I'm telling you, man, it's like, fuck you. You're the reason I'm listening to Metallica and Danzig in my dark bedroom. So like, no, you don't get to be into Metallica. And then I got the album. And like there was nothing interesting on that album, not a single fucking thing.
On the what's about the Black Album?
On the Black Album.
Well, I totally disagree with you on that. I think to me, when I heard the Black Album for the first time, like what I thought, they finally figured out how to write songs. That's the first thing I figured out. That's what I thought because the songs were so much more direct and strong. There wasn't like 15 minutes of other parts.
They were uninteresting. Like I couldn't close my eyes and use my imagination and go on a journey with like any of it.
Wow, I'm finding things out about us, Ryan. I didn't know.
Okay. I know.
I didn't know. It's like because I like all the
fourth episode of the podcast.
To me, I think Metallica. My least favorite of their classic albums is Kill 'Em All because it's just so immature.
It's raw.
You know what I mean? And I think that Ride the Lightning, Master Puppets is my two favorites. And then I like Injustice for All very much, although the production is famously terrible.
Although, I mean, it's just the bass guitar that's missing. So
I know, but
who cares?
Yeah, even the drums are a little too dry for my taste, if you compare it.
And there, you know what? I think that album is a good example of rawness that does communicate a certain... the band is grieving after the loss of Cliff.
You can feel it in the music, too.
And they can probably see that, after this album, all of Cliff's good ideas will have run out. Yeah. And then they'll release the sucky Black Album.
See, I totally don't agree with the Black Album sucky. I think, to me, like the first 5 Metallica albums are great. And then after that, they really were hit and miss from that point on.
I'll just say the first 4 Metallica albums are great, and after that, it's just...
I think I have more of a commercial ear than... I know that's not true. You like synth pop. What am I saying?
I totally have a commercial ear. It was just, even...
I thought the riff, like Sabbath True, was heavy as shit. It was really cool. I thought that was a great riff.
Dude, even one off of Injustice for All has an odd time signature.
That's true. And it got a lot of interesting little twists and turns. But see, I remember thinking, if I was writing this song and I was trying to write it to appeal to people, I wouldn't put those parts in. I would take those out, and I thought the Black Album, they just weeded out the parts that didn't need to be there, and they just kept it like very direct.
Yeah, those are all the parts I really liked. So there we have it. So
yeah.
we got.
Okay, let's get on to the real throwdown then.
We got to the root of it. Yeah. Well, okay, so then here's the debate then.
Okay.
Slayer versus Motley Crue.
Yes.
And the Slayer debate.
Here's my hypothesis on this one, and then we're going to talk it out. My hypothesis is that I've heard my whole life how much, the thrash bands are so much more authentic and so much more real than bands like Motley Crue and Rat. Those guys are just a bunch of show ponies and stuff. And I remember thinking, well, if you look at Slayer and what they write about, if you look at songs like Dead Skin Mask and Altered Sacrifice and that kind of stuff, Angel of Death and all these things, they're talking about serial killers and mass murderers and stuff. And I'm like, well, these are just a couple dudes from Orange County. They're not out in the streets with chainsaws murdering people. That's not what they do. When I see Motley Crue or Rat, they're talking about, I'm going to take a motorcycle and drive it really fast, and I'm going to get fucked up and go fuck like 4 girls. You know, that was what those guys did. They sang about what they were. So to me, I've always thought Motley Crue and Rat had like way more authenticity than Slayer.
I can't identify with riding a motorcycle.
But you know what I mean? Those guys did, though. That was their thing. I'm going to drive a Ferrari really fast.
No, I get that. Yep.
Totally. You know, that kind of, and that was kind of, they were not there's nothing inauthentic about what Motley Crue was saying about or Rat sang about. Those guys were singing about what they were doing, you know, whereas like Metallica, and not Metallica, but Slayer was like, yeah, dead skin mass murderers, you know, that kind of, I'm like going, that's totally, you're just a couple dudes from Orange County. You're not out murdering people in the streets. You're just singing things that make people's parents uncomfortable. And I know it's lucrative, but like that, don't pretend like you have some authenticity.
Never underestimate the value of making the parents uncomfortable.
No, I agree that, but that's the total value of that.
That's
though.
not just a joke.
No, I don't think it's a joke. No. I know. I could go ahead and have your say on that. I've put my 2 cents out there.
How do you feel about Iron Maiden?
How about Iron Man?
Iron Maiden.
I love Iron Maiden because they got the goods musically. That's
and the subjects of their.
But they're actually singing about a lot of different stuff, though. I mean, they sing about historical things. They sing about a lot of history. Yeah.
You know, so is Slayer.
No, I agree. Some of Slayer is that, but some of it's just
Dead Skin Mask. It's about Ed Gein and probably inspired by Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You know, Angel of Death was it was about the Holocaust. Tough, horrible stuff.
Yeah.
So, I would simply say. And full disclosure, I have a deep and abiding love for horror movies,
which I don't share with Brian.
As you know, King Diamond is my favorite band.
King Diamond is awesome. Yeah,
King Diamond all day, every day. If I'm on a desert, if I'm on an island, it's King Diamond and every band that Graham Bonnet ever sang for.
I think that I do know about you very much.
And that's a great workaround because then you get like actually more than just
Alcatraz, Graham Bonnet Band, and Pelletieri too.
Yeah. You get Michael Schenker Group.
Yeah,
totally. So I remember being on a church youth group trip, like late '80s, early '90s, something like that, and. And we convinced the 2 like chaperones or youth group leaders or whatever to let us go buy Tower Records on the way home. And I bought a copy of Slayer's Show No Mercy album with the dude wearing like the goat's like skull and like the pentagram made of swords and you know,
classic Slayer.
Totally. Yeah. You know, I grew up in that environment, right? So and you know that was the satanic panic was still real. Rock and roll is the language of rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there definitely should be piggybacked onto our conversations about why can't rock be fun versus what happened when rock music as a radio format committed suicide.
Yeah.
In the about 92, 93. I
kind of think it was like a murder suicide. You know what I mean?
Well, and yet Slayer should write a song about it.
Yeah.
And so, you know. You know, I miss that. I miss the youth group leaders being aghast.
Yeah, I think that
at
might be part
my
of
Show No
it.
Mercy album. Like, remember how fun it was to get a copy of Venom's At War with Satan album, and then you realize they're not at war with Satan. They're at war with Satan. And just, you know, considering, my dad's side of the family is Catholic. I went to Catholic school. My mom's side of the family is Southern Baptist, and the youth group trips and all that stuff. Man, as a kid, I needed Slayer.
I think that explains a lot.
I needed Venom, and I needed King Diamond.
That explains a lot about you.
Yes.
You know, the funny thing, I think part of the reason why it doesn't affect me is I didn't grow up religious at all. I had like no religious upbringing whatsoever. Yep. So to me, I just don't even look at that. To me, Motley Crue made more sense to me. Like, I could see going down.
Shout at the devil.
Yeah, hanging out with. Who cared about that part?
You don't know what you're shouting at him. Maybe when they're shouting at the devil, they're like, "Hey, devil, let's go."
All
hang
I know
out
is in the Home Sweet Home video, there's hot
know?
girls like flashing their tits at the band. I'm like, that was pretty cool. I'm down with that.
And
you know
what? They shouted at the devil, "Hey, come check out these tits."
Looks that kill, too young to fall in love. And,
Totally.
I mean, that
sleaze rock.
Yeah,
man.
totally.
It was great.
I remember thinking that was cool. I mean, I don't know. But
it was sex positive rock and roll.
It was I think we need to acknowledge very misogynistic. It was not like it was some kind of egalitarian. Let's all be equals. It was no like, doubt. Hey, baby, come
there
over
was
here,
definitely some objectification going on with Motley Crue.
For sure. I think actually what's funny though is by the time the '80s ended, it was kind of both ways. It was like the dudes were objectified, the women were objectified. It was sort of like we're just objects.
And and I mean, we should definitely have a female voice from who's familiar with that era. Yeah. To have that conversation.
Yeah, it's true. We can only speak from our
because we can only speak from our perspective, and like during those years of my life, I got a boner if the wind blew. So, you know what I mean? So all things, perspective being important. But yes, we should definitely get a female voice on this
I guarantee
podcast.
there's a TikTok channel right there for you for that one.
Well, there's probably many TikTok channels. I mean, isn't that what TikTok is?
OnlyFans for just like the wind. OnlyFans for the wind.
Only tense.
That's so funny. Well, I'm not trashing Slayer. Just to be clear, I respect Slayer. There's a lot of Slayer stuff I do think is cool. It's just I always thought that whole idea like we're authentic, but you're not. When it's like, well, dude,
I don't think Slayer. So I don't think Slayer is that. I think Slayer is more like I think their lyrical content is kind of more like fantasy oriented in the way that Iron Maiden's is.
Yeah, but Iron Maiden I always felt was more historical, sort of, and mythological and stuff like that.
Yeah, so like Slayer's not going to like write a song about the War of 1812.
Yeah, exactly. The Trooper is all about like the Russian War. It's like that's what that. It's almost like reading a history book and let's write a song about this.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And I think
although serial killers are a part of history.
No, it's true.
So Slayer gets some props.
Dude, there's a song on the new, not the new one, but this I guess 2 Testament albums ago. It's about the Night Stalker. It's about that guy. The same
shitty guy that killed people.
Yeah, well, a bunch of those people out there, but it's like that one particular one. And I remember hearing like, oh yeah, it's about Richard Ramirez. That makes sense. Like I recognize,
And growing up in that time, I mean, that was a thing to be afraid of when you were a kid.
Oh, of course, and it's still happening now. It's not like we don't have any wackadoos out there right now.
Well, I mean, kids are just afraid of getting shot at school these days.
That's true. That's just one of the things we're afraid of.
Right.
And the monkeypox and the avian flu.
Yeah. Right. Now we have disease, school shootings, and like the Yahoo comments section.
And then of course like the apocalypse is being brought on by climate change too, which is everyone gets to live. Oh, now it's going to be unlivable everywhere. Oh, sorry.
Yep. Again, I wish it were like aliens or something.
Yeah. It's never gonna be something cool like that.
Right. Or like a comet. Or anyway. But so I would just say Slayer's like it's fantasy stuff, and I'll say. Like I developed a really good right hand and was able to. No, I'm talking about playing guitar.
I thought you were going to talk about the right hand of justice, like Hellboy.
I mean, I mean, like if I was like watching the video for Girls, 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 then my right hand was doing something different. But in terms of as a guitar player, like learning songs like Black Magic, right, where it's all like pedal notes, like fast, like 16th note, 32nd note, pedal notes, and. I mean, Slayer might not have been the tightest, but like I developed learning those Slayer songs. Like, man, as a kid, I could play a pedal note.
Yeah. Well, at that time period too, if you learned Bark at the Moon, like everybody was doing that. You know what I mean?
Bark at the Moon. Yeah. So getting back to that whole era, right? Satanic Panic, right? People are telling you like what not to listen to. There's the clutching of pearls is going on all over the place.
You know what's funny about that time period from my perspective is I remember feeling like I remember it happening, but it's like over there somewhere. I never really paid attention to it. I was like, wow, because I wasn't religious. I didn't know anybody religious, so it was like, who cares? You know what I mean? It was one of those things. I didn't have any friends who were super hard.
Oh, dude, I was told in school that this is literal truth. For like a decade.
That makes sense.
And then a little more after that.
I think that explains a lot about your love for horror and things like Merciful Fate and King Diamond and stuff. It's very much a rebellious sort of thing.
The Exorcist is my favorite movie.
Yeah.
Because what's really frightening is what if all that shit's real? You
know what? I'll tell you this. Will tell you everything you need to know about Ryan and me. Ryan's favorite movie is The Exorcist.
Yes.
My favorite movie is Raiders of the Lost Ark. So
dude, the Nazis have their faces melted off.
Exactly, that's true. But like Indiana Jones, like that to me is like my all-time favorite movie, and I think that's like there's an optimism to that that's sort of like, you know what, I'm gonna get this shit done, whatever it takes, and I'm not gonna be afraid. I'm gonna jump into the danger and do what I have a do.
Yeah,
and there's like an optimism to that, which I really grabbed a hold of as a kid.
I appreciate that.
You know what I mean?
Meanwhile, I'm kind of like a nihilistic optimist.
That's great because you can't be disappointed.
Right.
I hope it goes well, but if it doesn't, then I win too.
You're right.
If everything goes to hell, then my nihilism itches scratched.
Yeah, but
you know,
there's no hell. So and you know what? If it did go to hell, then like Slayer would be playing.
That's
there.
true. They'd be playing South of Heaven in there, and perfect. Yeah, be awesome.
Good stuff.
It's true.
Well, right on. So yeah, I think so to close, I guess I would say, hey, rock music can be fun again.
I would say not can, it should be fun.
It should be
if
fun again.
If you want to actually ever have rock music have a place in rock in popular music what's close to where it used to be, it has to be fun.
It has to be because right now both the country genre and the rap and hip hop genre
and pop for that matter too.
Well, and pop, yeah, think about like any other genre of popular music.
Yeah,
the stuff that sells and gets streams it's all about having fun.
Yep, because that's what people want. People don't want to be.
And if it's modern country music, it's about having fun and also being dumb.
You know what's funny too? I actually, that I would agree that pop is like that too. Sometimes I hear a pop song, I'm like going, I feel like this is something for people with traumatic brain injuries to listen to. It's like I feel so insulted by.
Yeah, but I mean, they aren't singing like songs like about actually being dumb and how great it is to be dumb. It's a little more on the nose when the cowboy hats. I was
at a gym the other day and I was listening to something being played, and it was like literally for 3 minutes straight. It said, "This is the song that I play when I work out." That's over and over again. It's like, oonch, oonch. This is the song I play when I work out. Oonch, oonch. Like literally for 3 minutes, this is all they said, and I'm like going, what the hell am I listening to? Is this like, do people think this is music? Oh my God.
I think now might be a good time for another screening of John Carpenter's They Live.
Yeah. Oh, dude, maybe it might be right.
I think so. I mean, maybe that was a documentary.
Yeah. I actually think Idiocracy was kind of a documentary.
Like kind of, but dude, well, I mean, we're about to wade into politics here, so I should probably back off
That's
a little.
True.
But
no need to do that.
It was good.
Yeah.
It was. Idiocracy was a
unbelievably
good movie.
prescient. Like it's kind of like, oh yeah.
Yeah, there's. I'll just say that there are aspects of Idiocracy that I think were maybe a little too optimistic.
Yeah, I agree. But that I love the opening scene of that movie where like the idiot jocks like, I'm gonna fuck and then they have the parents who like have a college education, they're trying to get pregnant, they can't have a kid, and they end up divorcing and stuff.
And then later on, like that idiot jock walks up to me wearing my Catholic school uniform, going, "Dude, Metallica's great. Have you heard the Black Album?"
Yeah. And scene.
And scene.
All right, thank you for joining us on the Rock Guitar Confidential podcast with Ryan and Scott. We'll have socials up shortly. We're still working all the details of that out. In the meantime, can't wait to see you on the next episode.
It's out.